So while all this is going on, the mothers that are still in the United States, any of our family that's still in the United States living up here on this hill, they use this hill for the garbage dump. And we originally started living up here because this was our sacred site. It was out of the way. We put a sacred site up here because it was out of the way. It wasn't near the water. It wasn't near the farmland. It used to be you didn't come past Cottage Grove because the old people would manifest as, the dead people would manifest as hobgoblins. And if you sat over there, they would talk to you. You would have the experience of them coming out there to you if they wanted to. And you would chat with them and they would share things with you, whatever their unfinished business was, and you could get wisdom. But if you came in further, you would they would assume that you were trying to steal their bundles, that they would come up here before they were dead. They would live up here for a little while, and then when they were ready, they would build their scaffold and get on it. And I was doing some garden work in my front yard, and I found some of those crinoid beads. I've found several over the years. But if they're pierced and stuff like that, and they're laying around out here, you're probably really close to a burial site. They disrupted all sorts of burials when they built this place. And when the people moved up here, they did their best to move everybody to mounds over there. And then they tested the soil in the mounds and said this dirt was disturbed in the 1800s, and so they're not legitimate mounds. But they were they were genuine human remains in their stuff, everything just kind of piled up over there so that we wouldn't be living right on top of it. This went on for a little while, but then they started saying that the black people could live up here too, and they were coming up here. The first frame house is where my grandmother was born. It was a juke joint by the railroad tracks. Well, it was there before the railroad tracks. And then they put in the railroad tracks, and they saw this juke joint with the black people in there, and they got mad about it, and they did a lynching up there. And there's a ghost of the proprietor who still is feels like he's still hanging from that tree over there, and you can talk to him if you want to, and it's kind of weird. But that's where my grandmother moved up. So they had this rule that you could never say the N-word. And one day, Henry said to my grandmother something and said the N-word and got pushed off. Spirit hands pushed him off the cliff over there. He broke his leg, and it went through the skin. And when he woke up, they had cut his leg off. So, this is a very spiritual place where the dead and the living don't really make a lot of sense. You can't tell what's what sometimes. And, but this eventually becomes what's called a black covenant neighborhood, because the blacks are willing to do what anyone with honor would not do. And yet they still have some skills. I say you have to have righteousness to be able to lay a plumb line, but that righteousness could be some portion of obeying your father or something like that, who had more honor than you. And so you could still have some righteousness without honor. And so they were, you've seen the Emmett Till movie where they come and the black people come and they get Emmett Till for the white people. And there's nothing that the other black people could do. They just stand by and wring their hands. And so they were out there doing stuff like that. Now, my grandmother, shortly before she died, she helped him clear this place out like that. But she had thought that she understood all the escape routes, got them all out of here. Well, the black people had found out about where those escape routes were. So they didn't get out of here. And then she died shortly thereafter, was killed by her own son. And who took over her name, which they had masculinized. And so this is the kind of place. So shortly after, they made covenants illegal, then the sheriff everybody lost their jobs. Sheriff started coming around, and a whole bunch of white people bought this stuff for like $2, and they never got clear title on any of this land, though, because the blacks never had clear title on it. This place was never incorporated into the United States formally, and they just never thought to do it. There was no process on that. So they can't get like home improvement loans, they can't get any loans from a major bank or anything like that, and they sell it all to owner. And a lot of times it doesn't sell. The person who's living there just gets kicked out. So just disappears in the night, and somebody else is living there. Sometimes their stuff is still there, sometimes they get rid of their stuff. Sometimes they found that if they just move in and keep their stuff, it's too suspicious. People get too freaked out about it. So you got to get all their stuff out, move all your stuff in, and just say they decided it was a handshake deal, and we just went ahead with it. So they don't to make their living and stuff like that. They're cooking dope over there and everything. And anyway, so I am probably going to live here forever. I have advanced salience. A lot of times people with a lot of advanced salience would move up here younger and live here for a very long time. My son's going around. He is another kind of thing. After a certain point, it's your honor. You got to support your family. You got to do the things you got to do. But he has a different way about it. He's following the way of my husband, which was the way of the Tuareg, which is the way of you figure out your own reason to do what they're going to pay you for. And if you can figure out your own reason to do it, and then you use your skills to maybe redirect and say, well, if this is all about just obtaining some materials for something, why don't we get those materials over there? And that's an application of non-duality. Anyway, so he has the ability, because of the appearance of my grandmother, or the appearance of my great-grandmother, whatever, appearance of my mother, if he is called upon to clear out a nest of women, finds out that they have men who should have paid for them and should have set them up for disaster, the men that set them up for disaster, he can't refuse because they're unattended women. They are, in fact, unattended women. But if he finds who should have been attending, though he becomes a woman without any appearance changes.